Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out. Every single night we have the opportunity to go to these Meet the Candidates and debates all across the 1st Congressional District. Yesterday we were out in Montauk, and now we're here. We're out in Smithtown this week, so we're all over the district. I believe our country is heading in the wrong direction. We could be heading in a better direction than what we are right now. Me personally, I believe that this president is taking our country in the wrong direction. I have important priorities I've been talking about during our campaign: the need to grow our economy and create more good-paying private sector jobs. We all have stories of how our families, seniors, young adults can't afford to start their families here. Seniors can't afford to stay and they're leaving. There's a need to do a better job securing our borders and America's interests abroad. You all heard the stories over the summer with the unaccompanied immigrant children coming across the southern border. The lack of any type of a reasonable agreement between both parties in Washington. You hear a lot of Republicans blame Democrats, Democrats blame Republicans. Quite frankly, there's plenty of blame to go around to all of them. Our foreign policy, there's a need to make stronger and more consistent, whether it is ISIS or Israel, Iran, Syria, Ukraine. I believe that our foreign policy needs to improve. So there is a need to do a better job securing our borders and America's interests abroad. I also believe that we could do a better job fighting for our veterans who fought for us. We have a lot of veterans returning home with the mental wounds of war, with post-traumatic stress disorder, with traumatic brain injury. We have veterans waiting sometimes years for their disability claims to get processed. Hundreds of thousands of people waiting for their disability claims to get processed. We have some VA hospitals in parts of this country where we have veterans dying on secret wait lists. We can do a better job fighting for our veterans who fought for us. I also believe in higher standards, but I don't believe that Common Core is the right answer. I wrote the legislation in Albany to stop Common Core. You have these standards all across the country, tests created at the state level, curriculum set by the local school districts, and nobody's talking to each other. A lot of material within Common Core is not age appropriate. The English language arts domain, 6-year-olds, first graders, early world civilization and learning about ancient world Mesopotamia. The strategic advantage of the Tigris and Euphrates River with regards to development of the city of Babylon, 6-year-olds. We have 5th grade special ed students reading at a 2nd grade level, yet taking tests with their fellow 5th graders and failing. And finally, I personally believe that we need to repeal and replace Obamacare, which is resulting in higher premiums, higher deductibles, lost doctors, canceled policies, longer wait times, hospitals gaining monopolies. We need to improve healthcare in America. There are parts of Obamacare like covering people with pre-existing conditions, that's good. Allowing children to stay on their parents' policies until they're 26, that's good. But we can do a much better job than Obamacare. We can allow small businesses getting the hook. So those are some of our priorities. Look forward to answering your questions. It's an important election, and I appreciate your vote in 15 days.
Good evening to all of you. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. And I thank so many of you for coming out. I have had the honor of being your congressman for the last 12 years, and it is an honor that I ask for your vote to help me continue to remain in office. I want to just talk really about 2 things. The part of my service that I'm the most proud of, and that of my staff, is the work that we've been able to do to assist individual constituents. I really do believe it's the most important work government can do, that when I use the influence and the access and the experience that I have to help solve constituent problems, I really believe that that's the highest calling that any public official has. And it is something that we spend a great deal of time doing, and it's something that we're very good at. And whether it is interceding with a bank to help a family that's struggling to stay in their home be actually able to stay in their home. And right next door, for the last 4 years, we have run mortgage assistance workshops where we bring in lenders and we bring in people that provide legal help, and we actually help people work out the modifications that they need with their banks. So we've helped keep scores of people in their homes by virtue of the contact we've done. We help veterans. I think of all of the work we do for our nation's veterans is something that I think is exemplary, and I would take the veterans casework we do and stack it up against the veterans casework that any other congressional office does. And like I said, I think this is the highest calling that an elected official has, and it is something to which I and my staff have dedicated our time in office. I heard our colleagues that are seeking judicial positions talk about their endorsements, so I thought I would talk about mine. I am endorsed by virtually all of the law enforcement unions, the PBA, the detectives, the superior officers, the police conference. I am endorsed by virtually all of the labor unions on Long Island, the teachers. I'm endorsed nationally by the firefighters, and I'm endorsed by virtually all, if not all, of the environmental groups on Long Island. And it's not often that you find all of these groups agreeing, but I think the reason that they agree on me is that they know that even if I might disagree with positions that they have, they know that I have arrived at my position as a result of an honest inquiry and a very careful assessment of the issues, and I've learned and talked and evaluated all the information that comes to me. So in short, what I'm saying is that all of the different subgroups that make up our district, and the ones I've mentioned, fishermen, farmers, and so on, they trust me. They know that I'm going to listen, they know that I'm going to care, and that they know that I'm going to be as responsive as I possibly can be to the concerns that I raise. So I ask for your vote, and I thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you.
I think it's state senate, but I don't see Senator LaBelle here. State senate?
We have questions. Yeah, we're taking questions for the two candidates for U.S. Congressman. Yes, sir.
I have a question for Senator Zeldin. I wrote it down, it's a little complicated.
You need to talk a little louder.
I wrote it down, it's a little complicated. Do you agree public, non-federal pensions should be assets for seizure in federal bankruptcy? An example would be Detroit. The Detroit city workers lost 10% of their pensions because Detroit went bankrupt. It was a federal bankruptcy, so they lost 10% of their pensions. In New York State, our pensions are guaranteed by the state constitution. But in a federal bankruptcy, our pensions become an asset of the state, and they are subject to seizure in that bankruptcy. This is nationwide. Alabama, it happened in California, and there should be a move to protect the pensions, especially in Detroit. The people are not, that was the question. Do you agree public non-federal pensions should be assets for seizure in federal bankruptcies? The example is Detroit, a 10% haircut on the workers. And they have no Social Security or Medicare.
The answer is no. That's my friend. He follows me around to all of these.
Yeah, we've
He's
met.
such a nice guy.
We've met him.
We disagree on everything.
Mr. Bishop, you have an answer.
Do I agree that, I'm sorry, do I agree that they should be seized in a federal bankruptcy? The
That they
answer
should be
is no.
subject.
I believe that we should be protecting the pensions of individual workers.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to, Mr. Fields not here. Another question. Two
Okay,
more
I have a
questions.
question. I'm from the town of Smithtown, but I wanted to come here today and see Mr. Zeldin. And what I wanted to know is our landscape on Long Island is changing very drastically with the onset of high-rises and low-income housing. And one of my biggest concerns is some of the hotels are being taken over and converted into low-income housing, which is affecting our school districts because now we've got 30 in a class or more in the public school district. As if you were to be elected as congressman, is there anything that you can do about our landscape changing and all this low-income housing popping up all over in Long Island?
An answer, a minute or two to answer.
I think that, you know, there are federal programs being administered here on Long Island. We do have a lot of housing that is currently available. We have landlords who will purchase a lot of different houses. They will keep those houses in substandard conditions. I think that the administration of these programs has resulted in such where there is an appeal to create more of these high-density, high-rise housing. So and we're seeing it right now in Patchogue. The Ronkonkoma hub is another area where you're seeing a lot of this housing. And I think that one of the reasons why people are not purchasing or moving into some of the housing that's already available is that the landlords are not the property owners are not taking appropriate care of their property. So I don't really feel like we have a housing shortage where we need to continue to build all of this new affordable housing. I think that it would be great if our property owners were doing a better job administering administering their houses, some of the property owners collecting some of the federal subsidies.
Just real briefly, the federal government really doesn't get involved in land use decisions such as the ones you're describing. About the only piece of this that is federal or Section 8 housing vouchers, which are vouchers that go to the individual, and then the individual seeks the best housing they can find relative to the value of the voucher. And so those vouchers tend to aggregate in low rent and low to moderate income areas. And that's an area, I know John Sicitano was here somewhere, that we've talked about and tried to figure out how to best deal with for years. But in terms of high-rise housing, that's not something that the federal government gets into. In terms of clustering, zoning, things like that, those are really more local issues, and to a limited extent, I think, state issues, but they're much more local than they are federal.
Thank you.
I got one last one. This is to Tim Bishop. You talked about jobs, etc., and both of you talked many times about different jobs overseas. What is the federal government doing to bring jobs back that left? And actually, we paid with our own tax dollars to send them out of the country and gear them up in Mexico and different parts of it. We're wondering why we don't have work here, good paying jobs, when we negotiate with other countries to do work there. I mean, what is the federal government doing? What programs do they have in place that will keep the jobs here, number one, and bring some of the jobs that left back?
It's a great question, and it's a great question, and the short answer is federal government is not doing anywhere near enough. Let me give you a couple examples. We have a tax code that rewards corporations that ship jobs offshore. I'm a co-sponsor of a piece of legislation that would penalize companies that ship jobs offshore and reward companies via the tax code that bring jobs back. That seems to me to be just basic common sense. We can't get it through, and as I say, the existing code rewards companies that move jobs offshore. I'm a co-sponsor, actually I'm the sponsor. I wrote a piece of legislation that would tell any company that offshores call center jobs, and we've lost 500,000 call center jobs in the last 5 years, that we would tell them that if they do it, they would be ineligible for any federal grant, loan, or contract. And that would include being able to borrow at preferential rates from the so-called Fed discount window, something that's very important to banks, for example. So it would be a very powerful incentive to keep jobs here as opposed to shipping them offshore. And then the other thing that I think we really have to get a handle of that is also shipping jobs offshore are these so-called corporate inversions, where a company, a large company, American company, buys a much, much smaller company, let's say in Ireland or somewhere else, and then they shift their corporate address to Ireland, they avoid federal income tax, and they add to the payroll of the Irish company and reduce the payroll of the United States company. That, again, is something that the tax code allows that we have to stop.
Just a note to the other candidates, be careful because she really bangs this gavel. I get a little nervous every time she hits it.
Alice is worse.
Who's worse?
Alice.
Alice is worse.
That's good.
All right. I'm lucky then that you're next. Well, I think that there's a lot that we can improve to reduce the cost to do business here in the country. One of the reasons why a lot of businesses are moving their jobs overseas is because of the business climate here. There are many different proposals that are out there that can reduce our energy costs. You could reduce our reliance on foreign oil with regards to, there's a debate with regards to the Keystone Pipeline project. I believe it can be done environmentally sound, and certainly sound for our wallets, create jobs, create money, and reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We can reduce our capital gains tax. We can eliminate our estate tax. We need to reduce our health costs. Tort reform is one way to do that. I'm supportive of repealing and replacing Obamacare. Obamacare has resulted in higher health costs for businesses. One way to improve health care is by allowing small businesses to pool their policies. So I think that as you look at every level of government has a responsibility through their policies, through their taxes, through regulation, to improve the business climate and reduce the cost to do business. So I think that's the trick, as opposed to a lot of artificial means to put fences up between here and overseas. If we just make ourselves more competitive in the global economy, that we will bring more jobs here, and we'll keep more liquidity in America.
Another question over there.
As with anyone, before I'm any part of America, and I am very concerned that our borders are not secure.
I don't
Okay, I guess I do it.
Can you hear me?
Okay, so I'm very concerned that the borders are wide open, not only for the hundreds of people that are coming over. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we are running out of money to pay for everybody that comes into the country. But the bigger concern is these borders are wide open with the threats toward the American people, ISIS, the Taliban, everybody else that's out there that want to hurt the American people. What are being done to secure our borders?
So as I mentioned in my opening, back in July, a lot of people were talking about the surge of unaccompanied immigrant children across our southern border. There are parts of our southern border where it looks like everything's all good, and you go to other parts of our southern border, it's very porous. We are sending a message to Central and Southern American countries that if these parents turn their kids over to coyotes, once they come here, they'll be granted amnesty and they can stay. We need to change that message up. They should not be turning their kids over. The children who are coming here should be detained humanely and expeditiously reunited with their families back home. Our borders, I mean, there's challenges regarding our southern border, our northern border, our entry process, people with U.S. citizenship going over, signing up with ISIS, returning home, European citizens being able to come here because of the way the rules are set up. So with regards to our border, it's immigration, it's ISIS, it's health. With Ebola, I believe that we should stop the direct travel between these West African countries and the U.S. It's a sign of the dysfunction right now, though, in Congress. The President in July put out his proposal for securing the borders. The Senate Democrats put out their proposal. The House Republicans put out a proposal. And they didn't spend the August recess with all parties talking to each other, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, to strike a reasonable compromise. They came back in September, and they didn't pass anything. And I believe that that Congress can be functioning better than it is right now. And that legislation is a great example.
Real quick, I was one of a group of people that signed a letter to Speaker Boehner asking him not to take us out of session until we dealt with the issue of the borders. I signed that in late July, and Speaker Boehner took us out of session. Real quick. I don't think it's correct to say that the borders are wide open. The border has been fortified significantly in the 12 years that I've been in Congress. We have built several hundred miles of fence. We have spent billions of dollars trying to secure the border technologically with various means of monitoring the border. We've doubled the number of border protection agents. We've doubled the number of detention beds so we can stop this stupid policy of catch and release. So we have made great strides. That is not to say that the border is completely secure. No one would say that. It is not. But to say that it is completely open is also not accurate either. We have a lot of work that we still need to do. The comprehensive immigration reform bill that passed the Senate, bipartisan compromise that I support, has its first set of provisions are provisions that would take what we have done with border protection and increase the amount of money and staff and technology and building of protective walls that would try to continue to make the border more secure than it is now.
I think we should move on.
Only one last question.
This upcoming immigration roundabout amnesty, the president's work permits, are you in favor of that? And will you vote against the funding of that procedure?
I'm going to ask you to be a little more
The
specific about what you're
upcoming
suggesting.
amnesty, the president's doing the illegal amnesty, the work permits, the 34 million permits that he's going to allow people to come into our country from Honduras and
I don't, sir, I don't know what the source of your information is.
today's news.
Okay,
It's in today's news.
I'm sorry.
The question is, will you vote for the funding of the amnesty the president is going to provide?
I do not support amnesty. I support a path to earn legalization. I do not support amnesty.
I'm talking about the funding side, the funding that
Sir,
he's going to try to get this
Are you going to give
through.
me a chance to answer the question? Okay. So I just want to make sure I understand the question. Your question is, you're saying to me that the president has proposed that we give work permits to 34,000 people? Is that what you said?
34 million.
34 million people?
34 million.
If the proposal is to give work permits to 34 million, then no, I do not support that, but I also am unaware of that as a proposal that is on the table that anyone is considering.
One question. This year, Congress worked, I think, 137 days. I think most Americans find that offensive. So what will either one of you do to see to it that Congress works, gives an honest day's pay for an honest day's work?
So one of the things you could criticize about Albany is that we passed too many bills. I've been there for 4 years. We've had over 6,000 votes. One of the things that you see people criticize Washington for is that they don't pass enough laws. I don't know the exact number, 22 or 26 over the course of the last couple of years. It's important to see we've had one federal budget since 2007. There should be annual budgets, or at least biannual budgets. They should be passing budgets again. Those budgets should be balanced. There needs to be a process in place. Republicans and Democrats need to find the old days where they would sit down at a table and see where they can find common ground to move our country forward. And again, you have too much partisan bickering and political posturing, and I blame both parties for it. There are people in both parties, their only version of compromise is to have it 100% their way all of the time. We need people, if you're going to accomplish all of your work, whether it takes you 100 days in Washington or 200 days in Washington or 250, that there's a lot more that Congress needs to do to earn their paycheck. Not so much just how much time they spend in Washington, but start passing annual budgets again. Start agreeing to more compromises, and both parties are responsible for that.
As I said a few moments ago, I was one of quite a few members of Congress that wrote to the Speaker asking him to not take us out of session at the end of July for the 6-week recess that we had, August through early September. Speaker took us out of session, went into recess. We were also supposed to be in session through the 3rd of October or the 2nd of October, whatever that first Friday was in October, and the Speaker took us out of session a week early, sent us all home. Now, I think that's wrong. This is my 12th year in Congress. I spent my first 4 years as a member of the minority, second 4 years as a member of the majority, and then next 4 years as a member of the minority. In this last set of 4 years, we have never been less productive, never been in session less, meet fewer days, consider fewer pieces of legislation than we have the last 4 years. And I put that at the feet of Speaker Boehner. He is in complete control of what happens in the House. He controls the floor schedule. He controls the days in which we meet. And I think we need to be in session more. It's not like there aren't things going on that we ought to be deliberating. So I would encourage the next leadership of the Congress, whoever it is, to put us to work much more frequently in Washington than has been the case for the last 4 years.
We'll have closing statements, beginning with Mr. Zeldin.
Okay, and I think it's very important to highlight, again, as I was blaming both parties earlier, there are almost 400 bills sitting on Harry Reid's desk that he will not bring to the floor for a vote. There are over 40 jobs bills sitting on Harry Reid's desk. So you have both parties blaming each other. The fact is they could be there sitting in their chairs. What's more important is, are they actually doing anything with their time? I believe it's time to change Washington. I think that we could face a better direction, a better future for our children, for all of you here in this room, for this country, all across America. In our little corner of America, 2 weeks from tomorrow, we have an opportunity to send a message to Washington that enough is enough. The incumbent has been in office for 12 years. I personally believe that it's time for new leadership, a fresh perspective. It's time to go in a new direction down in Washington. If you keep re-electing the same congressman over and over and over again, how can you ever expect a different result? This is our opportunity in 2 weeks. And what's scary is how many of our friends and neighbors aren't registered to vote, or are registered to vote and may not vote, where people are able to get involved. My website is zeldinforcongress.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter. You can sign up for email updates. I need your help if you're willing to volunteer. We rely on volunteers to get out our message, so hopefully you sign up. Phil Goglis, raise your hand, our volunteer coordinator. Hopefully you can get involved in our race. Let's change America by changing our congressman November 4th.
You know, we were getting along so well. There's one thing that Lee says that I agree. Actually, there's a lot of things he says that I agree with, but there's one thing he says that I agree with in part. And that is, if you want to change Washington, you have to change the people you send there. We do. But I'm not part of the problem. I am a seasoned, fair-minded, pragmatic, solution-oriented member of Congress. There is not a soul in the Congress, not the most rabid Republican or the most rabid Democrat that would describe me in any other way than that. And at the risk of sounding self-congratulatory, I think the Congress needs more people like me, people that are willing to take a fact-based, experience-based assessment of the issues that confront us and try to find solutions, and do it in a collegial, civil fashion. That's what I do. Every graduation speech I ever gave at Southampton College, and I gave a lot of them, there were an awful lot of students who slept through them, and, but I talked about civility. And what Washington is missing more than anything else is civility, is respect. When I first went there 12 years ago, we could disagree. We did disagree. We were partisan. But the hatred, the contempt, the disdain that now characterizes the way we interact with one another wasn't there. That's what we need to rediscover. Partisanship is a part of government. Partisanship is a part of politics. But contempt should not be. And that's where we are. And so I believe that we need more fair-minded, even-tempered people like me who can partner. And I'll just give you one quick example. I'm going to run out of time. We've passed 26 bills of substance in the 2 years that were just ended. I wrote one of them with 3 other people, 2 Democrats, pardon me, there were 2 Democrats total, 2 Republicans total. And we did something that's become a lost art in Washington. We actually legislated. And we did something that has become a 4-letter word in Washington. We compromised. We sat in a room, we trusted one another, we went back and forth, and we said, we can live with this, we can't live with that, here's my line in the sand on this, but I'm willing to give on that. That's what legislating is. That's what compromise is. That's how you govern a country of 300 million people. I've done it. I've got a track record that does it, that says I've done it, and I've got that bill hanging on the wall of my office, signed bill, given to me by the chairman of the committee, a Republican, who gave it to me in appreciation for the partnership that he and I formed. So I do it. I live it, I do it, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
We'll move on to the candidates for New York State Senate, starting with the 1st District. Is Mr. Laval here?